Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I'm here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Small businesses in Canada can claim up to $5,000 from a class action settlement with Visa, Mastercard, and banks. Here to discuss this and how businesses contend with credit card payments is Corinne Pohlmann. She is a Senior Vice President, National Affairs and Partnerships at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Welcome to the program, Corinne.
Thanks for having me.
First, could you give us a little bit more detail about this class action settlement?
Sure. So the class action settlement was actually launched back in 2011, and it was really claiming, it was actually filed against Visa, MasterCard, and the major banks in Canada who issue credit cards, claiming that they were sort of being somewhat anti-competitive in that they wouldn't allow small businesses or merchants of any kind to surcharge or to forcing them to accept any card that they had to take, but also having exorbitant fees that were basically too high for many merchants to deal with. However, through the course of this particular class action settlement, many of these folks that the class action was launched against settled throughout the period of 10 years. And finally, the last group settled last October. And as a result of that, we have sort of two things that have occurred. One is an amount of about $130 million that was then to be redistributed to merchants. That is the settlement process, which is actually open right now. And there's a second component, which means Visa and MasterCard are going to allow merchants to surcharge in the future for any client, if they so choose, who pays by credit card.
So go through the surcharge part of it again. What does that entail?
So a surcharge is essentially an amount of money a merchant can charge their customers to cover their costs of accepting credit cards. So that is something that we've been not allowed to do for many years now or ever. And as of October 6th, they should be allowed to now surcharge if they so choose. There is a bit of a process to go through. If you choose to surcharge your customers, you have to register with the credit card networks and with your acquirer and do a few things that the companies require of you, Visa, MasterCard, that is, and then you'll be able to recoup some of those costs that are basically that you have to absorb as a merchant.
So you said $130 million, is that right, Corinne?
Yeah. Correct. That is the settlement amount.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, obviously. So I do want to get into the wider issue of these processing fees. We will do that. But first, maybe what are the timelines? How do companies, businesses apply for this? Some of those details probably would be important to share.
Yes, because we're coming up to the deadline. If you want to get a piece of the class action settlement, you're going to have to apply through a website called creditcardclassaction.ca, and there you can submit some information about your company. Basically, if you are a merchant and you've accepted either Visa and MasterCard and paid merchant fees to Visa or MasterCard anytime between 2001 and 2021, and there are some specific dates in either year, then you could be eligible for some of that money. It also depends on the volume of your company. So if you have revenues of less than $5 million on average per year, you can claim up to $30 per year for every year that you actually accepted credit cards. And then if you're a bit larger, between 5 and 250 million, then you can actually apply for 5 million and 20 million. Then you can apply for $250 per year. And it's a fairly simple process for those folks. So it's just a matter of filling out a few forms and attesting that you actually accepted credit cards. And then for the most part, you should be able to get at least some of that money.
And the deadline is again what?
September 30th. So we're coming up to that very soon. So yes. Get your application in by September 30th to sort of get a little bit of a piece of that settlement.
Fantastic. And was the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, were they part of this settlement? How were you involved?
So we were not a part of the lawsuit. However, we've been watching it closely for the last decade because it does have obviously big implications for small businesses. One of the things that we do as an organization is push for lower credit card fees and for more a level playing field within that particular sector. And this particular settlement or class action lawsuit was trying to achieve just that. So it's been a very interesting one for us to watch. We have since been working with the lawyers representing obviously the claimant in this case to make sure that small businesses are aware aware that this class action settlement is going on and that there is an opportunity to make back a little bit of money to cover some of the costs that they have paid to credit card companies over the last decade.
We're going to continue our conversation with Corinne Pohlmann after the break. Please stay with us.